I headed the state agency that regulates garbage landfills, tries to encourage recycling, and was involved with creation of a bill that required every city to recycle 50% by the year 2000. And I had a state senator make a speech a couple of years later, and she says, "We're not going to make that." She says, "But we'll be over 50% by 2005. You know, I'm appreciative that we're out there trying to do it. We were at 47% recycling in this state, by far the best of any state in the country in 2000. And by 2005, as she predicted, we were at 53%. So, you know, if the goal is 80% with Chuck Reed and we only get to 75% in his time frame, it is a spectacular movement on the result we want.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that the amount of investment that's going into you know, clean tech and alternative energy right now, I think worldwide is about $100 billion and growing very, very quickly. And it's already starting to stimulate industries. In fact, Newsweek just came out with a feature article talking about all the new jobs that are developing in this area. It's interesting, you start to see other things that are, you know, reinforcing that. For example, Monster Track has launched a green careers website, you know, specifically targeting college students to get them into green careers and so forth. So there's this enormous wave, and by really pushing that envelope forward, we can really stimulate the economy and address a lot of the health issues that we're talking about.
I want to encourage the public to participate in these meetings and what you're doing, and so I've already laid out some of that, but talk about your committee. How often do you have meetings? Is the public allowed to participate? If the mayor hasn't appointed to them the committee, do they still get to submit ideas? How would you take ideas?
Absolutely. There are actually several different ways that that people can become involved. One is, as I mentioned, there are a lot of citizen teams that are developing in cities under the Cool Cities Initiative, Sierra Club's Cool Cities Initiative. So if people go to the website and sign up, they can get hooked up with the teams that are active in their city, or you can, you know, look up the cities and contact the leaders there. And so that's one way. And there are a lot of resources there to help people get educated and explain, you know, how they can approach their mayors and so forth. So that's one way. Another way is that cities are forming, as I mentioned, like in San Mateo and other cities like Palo Alto and San Jose, what are known as Green Ribbon Task Forces. And the Green Ribbon Task Forces help the city put together a climate action plan and also engage the community. And in engaging the community, you know, it means public input at the meetings. It also means, you know, outreach events. There were a number of events held in a number of these cities to get the public input. You know, what are the sorts of solutions we can implement? One great one that I just learned recently is a lot of cities are looking at what are called walking buses. You know, a lot of something like 50% of the morning commute is parents taking their kids to school. And we've lost a lot of the walking to school, you know, culture. And of course, you know, there's childhood obesity that comes out of that and so forth for lack of exercise. A lot of communities are saying, well, we've got to have a way that's safe for the kids to get to school, and that, you know, why not walk them to school? And so you have a couple adults that literally go house to house and pick up the kids to take them to school, walking. Yeah.
So we're going to be back with Rafael after a public service announcement. We're going to talk a little bit more about what you can do because you can solve our environmental problems, climate change, energy use, you name it. It all starts with you and I. We'll be back in 30 seconds. Hi, I'm Terry Trumbull with Breathe California. My guest is Rafael Reyes, an all-around all-star. As a director of the International Sierra Club. I met him as a leader of the local chapter of the Sierra Club covering San Mateo, San Benito, and Santa Clara County, where he was responsible for a whole bunch of innovative programs. One that you may or may not want to take credit for is the Cool Cities program. What does Cool Cities mean?
Cool Cities is all about, you know,
refrigeration?
Yeah. Well, in a sense, yes. You know, I mean, we have to look at Cool Cities is about making our communities cool, both in the sense of making it engaging, right, for the community and active, but also about, you know, reducing the temperature of the planet. Yeah. And To do that, we need to implement solutions at every level. We need to make sure that there's community support. We need to make sure that we are developing the technologies that you can develop at local levels, try them out, and then scale them up. And so the Cool Cities initiative is specifically focused on getting local communities, cities and counties, to implement those solutions locally, getting the public engaged, and then scaling up those efforts so that we make sure that we have national solutions that will address climate change.
Yeah, and let's just emphasize, when we talk about Cool Cities, it all wraps together. Because what we do to prevent air pollution is the same thing that we're doing to prevent use of energy, which we're running desperately short on, is the same thing that we're doing to prevent climate change. These are all intimately tied together. So I'm going to give you an amusing example to fit your Cool Cities model. 7 years ago, I was on the advisory council to the Air District, and Lawrence Livermore Labs had done some studies to indicate incredible savings in terms of ozone production. In other words, reducing heat in cities by having white surfaces on buildings instead of dark surfaces.
Yep, that's true.
And so, you know, they wanted to propose that the roofs, for example, either be plants, which assimilate the energy, or if you didn't have that, white surfaces. But they also proposing the sides of buildings and even white asphalt. And the outcry that we got from established, you know, roofing industries, paving architects and builders, the elected board of the Air District ran away and left it and paid no attention to it. Is that a kind of program that you'd
Absolutely. I mean, you know, if you really look at how we build buildings today, we use a lot of very antiquated techniques, and there's a real opportunity to apply some creativity to deal with some of the problems that we have. And it was interesting, Amory Lovins at the Rocky Mountain Institute did a project recently taking off-the-shelf technologies to an existing house and reducing the energy consumption by 80%.
Yeah.
And actually making the house cheaper to run. And in fact, if it had been built that way to begin with, it would have been cheaper to build. So, I mean, it's a win-win all around. And of course, you know, here in the Bay Area, like in many parts of the States, we have a lot of buildings that are actually quite old, you know, with very, very poor insulation and so forth. And it was interesting, in San Mateo, like a lot of cities, they're actually evaluating the carbon footprint. So San Mateo did an analysis of where the emissions are coming from.
Just let me interrupt you. What in the world's a carbon footprint?
Good question. So one of the ways to tackle the problem, or the first step really to tackle the problem in a comprehensive way, is to figure out where the pollution is coming from, what's driving the pollution. You know, we know it's cars as a factor, we know it's, you know, energy use in buildings, but how much from where, from what parts of the community tells us a lot about the kinds of solutions that we should be putting in place. And in the case of San Mateo, like a lot of other cities, we discovered that natural gas ended up being a really big piece. Yeah. And in fact, it was bigger in residential homes than just electricity usage. And it reminded me of when I bought my place. You know, it's built in 1980. I figured, you know, it should be in pretty good shape. And in the winter, you know, the first winter, I walked around, it was really kind of cold, you know, and I was running the heater a lot and so forth. And I walked around and I discovered one of the windows was literally like just pouring this cold air into my place. And there was, you know, there was a gap. And so
it wasn't built with double pane windows.
It wasn't built with double paned windows. There was very poor insulation. And I went through and I, you know, went to the hardware store and put some insulation, some caulk, and immediately it improved the temperature in my place and to reduce the heat usage.
So one of the reasons that natural gas shows up so high is the sad part about my 35 years of working on air pollution control, because